Morning, good to see everyone this morning. We're in the book of 1 Kings right now. We'll go on to 2 Kings. In case you've not figured it out, you need to be reading ahead on 1 and 2 Kings. Become familiar with these two great books because we will move very quickly in this class. We're in chapter 3 this morning. We've already seen the beginning of Solomon's reign, of course, the death of David, and now we continue with Solomon's reign, in particular his first great confrontation or conversation with God. Now Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married Pharaoh's daughter. Then he brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord, and the wall all around Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the people sacrificed at the high places because there was no house built for the name of the Lord until those days. Please observe that Solomon did not violate the law against marrying the Canaanite women, which you'll find in Deuteronomy chapter 7. However, there's a mistake that is evident here in marrying someone outside of God's people. And you see the impact of it later in his life in the book of 1 Kings chapter 11, when he ends up worshiping and being drawn away, his heart drawn away by his wives. High places. Most of the time in Scripture, the high places are talking about something that's bad because that's where they worship false gods. They would erect an altar on a high place. However, at this point in time in Israel, there's nowhere to go. The ark has been moved, but the tabernacle, we don't find any real evidence of it, to be honest about it. And we're waiting for the building of the temple. Once the temple is built, then the high places become illegitimate places of worship. They're no longer acceptable. But as long as you're worshiping God, the God of heaven, and only the God of heaven, then for the time being, this is all right. I think you need to see that distinction. Then we find verse 3, and Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. Now, the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask, what shall I give you?" Now pause just a minute. Here we find Solomon's heart. It's set right now on God. As is noted, he offers a great sacrifice. This is the first sacrifice that we find that Solomon makes, and you'll notice immediately God comes to him. Comes to him in a dream, that's true enough, but he comes to him. He wants to know what he would have, and you all are very familiar with this. Solomon responds, verse 6. Solomon said, "You've shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in truth, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. You've continued this great kindness for him, and you've given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you've made your servant king instead of my father David, but I'm a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" And so Solomon's request is for wisdom. Now it's interesting to note, he describes himself as a child. That's not in terms of age, it's in terms of experience. He talks about going out and coming in. That's generally speaking a military term. You'll remember that David went out and in and out in the era of Saul. as king. And when he did that, he was going out most of the times to confront the Philistines because they were the major enemy in the lifetime of Saul. So he said, I don't have any experience and I need help because your people are great. Notice that when men are focused on God, that they acknowledge the greatness of God and the greatness of his blessings. And that's exactly what Solomon does in this place. He lays out those blessings that God has given. And so God responds, beginning in verse 10. The speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. Then God said to him, because you've asked this thing and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have you asked riches for yourself, nor have you asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice. Behold, I've done according to your words. See, I've given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you rise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. And so God pleased with the request. He responds by saying, you get what you asked for. I'm going to give you the wisdom to rule my people, to guide them. But beyond that, I'm going to give you riches. You're going to be a man who has that, and you're going to have honor. We're going to see some of that later. Think Queen of Sheba and people like that. They're going to come along a little bit later in this book. And now watch verse 14. And here's what I would suggest. And I don't know if you write in your Bible or you don't. It's your business, not mine. But when I go through my Bible, I pick up on this kind of expression all the time. And I've circled two words in verse 14. The first word I circle is if. And the second word I circled is then. You're going to see these if-then statements over and over again in Scripture. God's covenants are most interesting. They contain two elements every time. Number one, they contain promises. Number two, they contain conditions. And so what do we got here? If, then. So here's the promise, that's the then. And if is the condition that you got to meet. So watch him. So, if you walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. And he's going to expand on that later, but this is what he says right now. And we need to pick up on that and realize that God does have conditional promises that he gives. Now, verse 15, then Solomon awoke, and indeed it had been a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, offered up burnt offerings, offered peace offerings, and made a feast for all his servants. What is his immediate response? Keep the law of Moses. That's what his father had done, David, and that's what he does now. So he's meeting up at this point in time, he's meeting the if condition. If you, then he's going to do this. Well, he's meeting that. Verse 16. Now 2 women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. Could we just stop just a minute and think about something? If you had these 2 women of this particular type coming before you, which one would you believe? The truth is, they're not of the greatest moral character. They're not upstanding people. You don't necessarily expect true testimony from them because that's not the nature of, if you would, the business that they're in. And so I want us to see that because it's not going to be instantly evident which one of these is right. From the human perspective, we might think, well, one could be lying just as easily as the other one. But Solomon displays the wisdom that God gave him. And one woman said, "Oh, my Lord, this woman and I dwell in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then it happened the third day after I'd given birth that this woman also gave birth. And we were together. No one was with us in the house except the two of us in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. So she arose in the middle of the night, took my son from my side while your maidservant slept, and laid him in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was, dead. But when I had examined him in the morning, indeed, he was not my son whom I had born. Then the other woman said, no, but the living son is my son, and the dead one is yours. And the first woman said, no, but the dead one is your son, the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. Who do you trust? I'm not sure you can trust either one of them. So what's Solomon going to do with it? Here he comes. Then the king said, bring me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. Then the woman whose son was living spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son. And she said, oh, my lord, give her the living child and by no means kill him. But the other said, let him be neither mine nor yours, but divide him. So the king answered and said, give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother. Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? That's the exact response you'd expect from a mother. I don't want to sacrifice living with my child as he grows up, but I don't want him to die. And so she's willing to submit and just let the child go to the other woman. That tells you who the mother is, and Solomon displays that clearly. And all Israel heard the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. The word feared there would be our word respect. They respected the king. They respected him because of the wisdom that God had given him. And it's very, very apparent in this great judgment that he has given at this time. So, chapter 4. So King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were his officials: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest, Elihoreph and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, scribes, Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder, Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, over the army, Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, Azariah, the son of Nathan, over the officers, Zabud, the son of Nathan, a priest and the king's friend, Hishar, over the household, and Adoniram, the son of Abda, over the labor force. And Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel who provided food for the king and his household. Each one made provision for 1 month of the year. Now pause just a minute. Do you remember what happened when the people asked for a king? Of course, first of all, Samuel thought he'd been rejected, and God said, no, they've not rejected you, they've rejected me. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to them, and I want you to tell the people, here's what's going to happen if you have a king. And what was that? Well, basically the king's going to tax you. The king's going to take your sons and your daughters and make them his servants, and on we could go. Those are the kinds of things that were done. Well, as wise as Solomon is, and as good a king as he is in the outset, you got to readily acknowledge that he is taxing the people. He divides the country into 12 parts, 1 part for each month. And what's their job? Their job is to feed the king and his household. That's their job. That sounds like a tax to me. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but that's what it looks like to me. He's doing exactly what God said that he would do. And so he goes ahead. These are their names: Ben-Hur, and in the mountains of Ephraim. Okay, Ben-Hur is a rather famous name. If you like to read old classical novels, there's a novel entitled Ben-Hur what does Ben-Hur mean? Well, anytime you see Ben, that just means son of, the son of Hur. And is this the Hur that we know about from earlier? Well, not likely. And why not? Because too many years. We're the Hur that we'd be thinking about, if we're going back that far, would be the one that served with Moses. And we're over 500 years past that. So this is not that man. Now, could he be of the same family? Possibility, I suppose. You'd want to check what tribe's he from and things like that. And I haven't done that. I'm being honest about it. I'll just tell you, you need to double check it first. Ben Decker in Makaz, Shalbim, Beth Shemesh, and Elon, Beth Hanan. Ben Hesed in Araboth. To him belongs Succoth and all the land of Hepher. Abinadab in all the regions of Dor. And he had Taphath, the daughter of Solomon, as wife. So what does that make him to Solomon? It's his son-in-law. So his son-in-law is in charge of one group, is what we just learned. Bana, the son of Ahilud, in Tanakh, Megiddo, and all Beth-Shean, which is beside Zeratam below Jezreel, from Beth-Shean to Abel-Maholah, as far as the other side of Jokneam. Ben-Gibber in Ramoth-Gilead. To him belong the towns of Jair, the sons of Manasseh, in Gilead. To him also belong the region of Argob in Bashan, 60 large cities with walls and bronze gate bars. Ahinadab, the son of Iddo, in Mahanaim. And remember, Mahanaim is 2 camps, I believe. Himanaz in Naphtali. He also took Basemath, the daughter of Solomon, as wife. Who's this guy? Well, it's another son-in-law. So he's got 12 divisions, and his 2 of his sons-in-law are over 1 division each in this area. Then you've got Bana, the son of Hushai, in Asher and Aloth. Jehoshaphat, the son of Peruah, in Issachar. Shimei, the son of Elah, in Benjamin. Geber, the son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, in the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan. He was the only governor who was in the land. Okay, so we got a list of all these people. The most significant thing to remember here is we got 12 divisions, and Solomon's mapped it out so that he's going to be taken care of. That he's going to be provided for, and it's going to be done month by month by month. So that's a significant element of that. Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and rejoicing. Now wait a minute. What do you mean sand by the sea in multitude? What's going on here? The fulfillment of the promise to Abraham. Now let's briefly look back. We'll start with Genesis chapter 12. That's the first time that God gives a promise to Abraham. And in Genesis chapter 12, you remember he's asking him to leave his father's house, or the home that he grew up in. Here's what he says. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse him who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land of the place of Shechem as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were there in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land, and there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. So you're going to be a great nation, no doubt about that, and you're going to get the land. Those are the promises, and we're beginning to see the fulfillment of that as we look here. And I gave you several other references. They expand on that a little bit, but they're basically a repetition of the promise to Abraham. That's all I'm trying to do, is give you something to grab hold of there as you look at that. So Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the river. The river, what is that? This is the Euphrates. If you look at a map, and I don't have a board up here, but if I did, you never can tell what I draw anyway. So just imagine this. The Tigris and the Euphrates are like a great U flipped down on its side. They join together at the lower portion. That would be more or less the south east, and then they go out from there. The Tigris runs the northern route, and the Euphrates runs the southern route. So as you read the Bible, occasionally you'll see, especially in later translations, you'll see the word Mesopotamia. That just means land between the rivers. Like you might say, if you go up in northern Tennessee and then on into Kentucky, you've got land between the lakes. Well, this is land between the rivers, Mesopotamia. Rich land that's very, very productive. So when you ask Abram to leave Ur, you're asking him to leave. He's down there close to where the two rivers join. That would be rich, rich farmland. Beautiful place to live, and certainly could support your family there. He goes on up to Haran. Haran is up the Euphrates side of the land between the rivers. It's still in the rich territory, but now he's being asked to leave there. And so what he'll do now is he'll go on up where he comes out from between the rivers, and he ends up coming down the mountain range of the coast to come into the land of Canaan. That's what we're describing there. So now we got the river, that's the Euphrates, that's a long way up there, is the northern border of the land of Israel under the reign of Solomon. So Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the river to the land of the Philistines. So that takes us to the coast, because the Philistines lived on the coast. And then he goes on as far as the border of Egypt. Now we've gone south all the way to the Egyptian border. Roughly, you're talking about the Red Sea, roughly, and down in that area that is included. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Now Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 fatted oxen, 20 oxen from the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebuck, and fatted fowl. For he had dominion over all the region on this side of the river, from Tifsha even to Gaza, namely over all the kings on this side of the river, and he had peace on every side all around him. Has the promise to Abraham been fulfilled? The answer to that is yes. It has been fulfilled. Now, what about all this food? How does this break down? Well, Horner, and if you've not ever looked at this and you ever want to teach this class, you want to go to thebible.net and look for videos. There's a little bitty link that says videos. Click on that and go to 1st and 2nd Kings. He also combines 1st and 2nd Chronicles because they are harmonized and they really fit for a harmony, and you'll see that as we go through our study. And when we click on that, here's what Horner has to say about this. He says this feeds about 14,000 people at 2 pounds of bread and 1.5 pounds of meat per day per person. That is some more tax. And it's fairly typical and classic when you think about it in terms of government. When it gets really big, it sucks up a lot of money just to supply for the people that are in power. Now, I want you to think on down the road. We're going to come later to a fellow by the name of Rehoboam. That's Solomon's son. You remember him? You remember what the people say? They say, your daddy overtaxed us. If you'll cut our taxes, we'll keep serving you all of our lives. Well, look at the tax. When you start talking about it, that's a pretty good tax that we're talking about in this place, and it's presented here for us. Now, they had peace. So Solomon reigns in peace. That's in great contrast, really, to his dad, who did not get to live in peace. David was constantly having to fight the people around him. So he goes ahead, verse 25 of chapter 4. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and his fig tree, from Dan as far as Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Lynn, I want to ask you a question, because I know you do accounting. Is not one of the easiest mistakes to make in accounting is getting your numbers mixed up? He just nodded yes. And I know that for a fact. I've done it myself. And occasionally it'll get you in real trouble. Okay, the scribes have a difficulty when they're copying these words. And it's something we may not think about, but it's evident, it seems to me, here. If you go to the book of 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 25, it says that Solomon had 4,000 stalls, not 40. And that seems to be the better answer. When you look at the number of horses and chariots, 4,000 fits better. So what happened? You say, oh, there's a mistake in the Bible. Well, probably a mistake in terms of numbers. That's true. And it's very easy to do. Very, very simple. All you got to do is slip in one extra zero and to go from 4,000 to 40. It's real easy. And that's what we think they did. So I'm going to tell you this in addition to that. We have one obligation and one only. When somebody throws out an alleged or supposed contradiction, our job is simply to supply a plausible answer. You cannot say, I know it's this. Why not? You're not God. Neither am I. Can't do that. But I can give you a plausible reason why it says 40 here and only 4 over there. And my suspicion is we messed up. There's a zero mistake here. And it's in the numbering that is put there. So that's my answer, and I'm sticking with it to that particular thing. All right, yes. Do what now? Oh, the NIV actually fixed it to 4,000. And there's, by the way, the Septuagint fixed it as well. So the Septuagint's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, and it's very old. You know, they modified it years ago. NIV must have followed Septuagint. And you say, oh, what about that? Well, the Lord often quoted from the Septuagint. You can tell by the wording that he's quoting from the Septuagint. So that's for another day, but I thought you'd find that to be of some interest. Okay, so he goes on. And these governors, each man in his month, provided food for King Solomon and for all who came to King Solomon's table. There was no lack in their supply. They also brought barley and straw to the proper place for the horses and steeds, each man according to his charge. And God gave Solomon wisdom exceedingly great, and understanding and largeness of heart like the sand of the seashore. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, Calcol, Dardar, the sons of Mahal, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Okay, we don't have all his proverbs. And neither do we have all these songs. In fact, we're not even sure we have any of the songs except maybe Song of Solomon. That might be his. But we don't have all these things. All we know is this biblical statement that he did all these things. He spoke of trees, from the cedar tree of Lebanon even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke also of animals, of birds, of creeping things, and of fish. And men of all nations, from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom, came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. So he knew about horticulture, and he knew about animal husbandry. So he's got a broad-based knowledge, doesn't he? And it exceeds any man that ever lived, which is exactly what God promised. So it really shouldn't surprise us that would be the case. All right, chapter 5. Now, Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon because he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father, for Hiram had always loved David. Then Solomon sent to Hiram, saying, "You know how my father David could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God, because of the wars which were fought against him on every side, until the Lord put his foes under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There's neither adversary nor evil occurrence. And behold, I propose to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord spoke to my father David, saying, Your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, he shall build the house for my name. Now therefore command that they cut down cedars for me from Lebanon, and my servants will be with your servants, and I will pay you wages for your servants according to whatever you say. For you know there's none among us who has skill to cut timber like the Sidonians." Now it sounds like, if you just read this text, it sounds like Solomon made all these arrangements. What you really need to do, though, is to go to 1 Chronicles chapter 22. Because in 1 Chronicles chapter 22, we actually learn that David made a contract before Solomon had ever come to power as king. Now, I'm not going to read this entire chapter, but you could, because the whole chapter talks about the arrangement, the agreement that they had at that time. But particularly, I want us to notice this, verse 3 of 1 Chronicles 22. "And David prepared iron in abundance for the nails of the doors of the gates, and for the joints, and the bronze in abundance beyond measure, and cedar trees in abundance for the Sidonians, and those from Tyre brought much cedar wood to David." So remember, David made preparations for the construction of the temple. And apparently the agreement was laid out beforehand. Now, sometimes, I could tell you in Scripture, sometimes something is stated as being done because it's been prearranged and it's going to be done. And that may be what we're getting here, that David's made the arrangements for all the wood to be moved, but now Solomon is simply going ahead and confirming the contract. That could be what we're looking at. Is that it? Well, again, I'll let God tell you that one day, but that's what it appears to be the case here to me. Now watch the response. "So when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, that he rejoiced greatly, he said, Blessed be the Lord this day, for he has given David a wise son over his people. Then Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I've considered the message which you sent me, and I will do all you desire concerning the cedar and cypress logs. My servant shall bring them down from Lebanon to the sea. I'll float them in rafts by sea to the place you indicate to me, and I'll have them broken apart there. Then you can take them away, and you shall fulfill my desire by giving food for my household. Then Hiram gave Solomon cedar and cypress logs according to all his desire. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, and 20 cores of pressed oil. Thus Solomon gave to Hiram year by year. So the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he had promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty together. All right, briefly notice Solomon asked for the building materials. Why cedar? Because the cedars of Lebanon are very well known in antiquity. They're known for their grandeur, for their beauty. The wood is very, very durable. And then furthermore, when you polish it, it's just gorgeous. So he's chosen a wood, David has, and Solomon's carrying out on it, a wood that's going to make for a gorgeous, gorgeous building, and it's going to be a building that will last. What about the Hiram praising the Lord? I would suggest to you, as I have here from Kyle and Delitzsch in their Old Testament commentary, that the praise that Hiram gives to God is not acknowledging him as the only God, but instead is acknowledging him as a God, if you would, the God of Israel, much like he would have gods of his own land. So that's probably what we're looking at. So he floats these logs. How did Solomon pay him? He paid him a stipend in agricultural produce. It's over 50,000 bushels, 800 tons of grain, and more than 100,000 gallons of pure olive oil. And there was peace between the nations. Olive oil is the principal oil that's used in cooking back in that era. Even today, it's used frequently, especially in very, very tasty dishes, to be honest about it. It's good oil, especially if you get pure oil. It's extremely good. So that is the way that this chapter will wrap up. Listen to him as he goes on. So the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he had promised him. There's peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty together. Verse 12. Now 13. Then King Solomon raised up a labor force of all Israel, and the labor force was 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in shifts. They were 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the labor force. Solomon had 70,000 who carried burdens and 80,000 who quarried stone in the mountains, besides 3,300 from the chiefs of Solomon's deputies who supervised the people who labored in the work. And the king commanded them to quarry large stones, costly stones, and hewn stones to lay the foundation of the temple. So Solomon's builders, Hiram's builders, and the Gebalites quarried them. They prepared timber and stones to build the temple. Okay. They're quarrying them, and they're actually at the place where they quarry, at the rock quarry, they're actually laying this all out so that it's ready to go together. Now, I don't know if they numbered stones. I don't know how they did that. I can't tell you that. But some of these stones are massive in their form. They're very, very huge stones. You'll see that later also with the temple that is built by Herod. Some of those stones weighed upward of 100 tons each per stone. But they're laid out there. Why? Well, you're going to see that in the next chapter. That's so that there's not a sound of a metal tool on the whole temple ground. Never the sound of a tool is to be heard. So it's kind of interesting to see the way that he does that. All right. So you'll notice Whitworth says he's got 30,000 Canaanites that he uses. How do we know the 30,000 are Canaanites? Go to chapter 9. Makes it pretty clear. They worked in Lebanon in 1 month on, 2 months off shifts as they went to work to prepare raw materials for the temple construction. Solomon conscripted. Anybody know anything about conscription? Thank you. I knew somebody here would know. Conscription's a draft. He drafted 150,000 Israelites to be a part of the work. Now, remember, God told the people this is what's going to happen. You know, the king's he's going to just draft whoever he needs, and he's going to use you. And you see evidence of that here. All right, chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, they began to build the house of the Lord. Please turn to 1 Chronicles 28, verse 19. Now this is, remember, all you're doing here is running a harmony. And there are those that, like J.W. McGarvey did a harmony of the Gospels. You can do the same thing with 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. You can run a harmony. Look at verse 19. And if you write in your Bible, then I'm going to give you something to write. If you don't, then I'm going to tell you anyway. And you can decide what you're going to do with it. All this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me all the works of these plans. I underlined the word plans. Why did I underline it? I also wrote out this verse underneath that. Exodus chapter 25, verse 9. So if you will, turn to Exodus chapter 25. And we're going to look at verse 9 because that same word is used twice in Exodus chapter 25, verse 9. Here it is. According to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. I underlined in that verse 2 words, pattern and pattern. Why? Same word. Identical word. So what is the writer telling us in 1 Kings chapter 6? He's saying the plan for the temple was not made by David, it was made by God through David. Just as surely as the tabernacle was built under God's direction by Moses, and God laid out the plans for it, in the same way the temple is being built by Solomon, and God laid out the plans for it. I'm going to really shock everybody. Today I'm giving you 2.5 minutes.